Good morning. I'm your host, Brock Yorty, and this is the Driller Newscast, Episode 5. This week in the news, we'll talk about the bottled water industry, specifically what's going on in the Great Lakes regions. Next, we'll jump across Lake Huron into Ontario, Canada for our featured driller, Mike Steffens. Our main story of the week is on mental health in the construction industry and what we should be looking for. How are you doing? Do you know what's going on inside our employees' heads? But before we get into the news and our featured story, let's have our Monday morning safety meeting. For this week in safety, I don't want to talk about our standard operating procedures or our job safety analysis or everything it takes to execute and complete a project. I want to talk about everything that happens before the job starts. What does our team and our equipment encounter before we even start turning to the right or pulling that pump? Driving is one of our most dangerous tasks we do daily. If you look at what just happened last week in the Midwest and the Northeast with the snow, slippery conditions, we have animals out on the roads because it's spring. The time changes happened to when we first get to that job site, and instead of just pulling right in and backing over that stake, pulling right off the road, jumping out of that piece of equipment, everybody walking the site looking for holes, broken off fence posts, subsurface obstructions, above ground obstructions, all that we encounter before we even get to the point of what we need to make money. So what I do, I jump out of that rig and I walk the path my rig is going to take right up to where that well stake is or where I'm putting that cathodic hole, that GPS location. And I do a 360 degree observation. You know, OSHA, if we go to 1926 subpart CC, cranes and derricks in relation to power lines, you know, we need to be 10 foot away from that overhead obstruction if it's 50 kilowatts. And if it's 51 kilowatts to 200, it's 15 feet. And it goes on beyond that. Every 5 feet, you know, we can't chance fade on that. We've had too many pieces of equipment, from fall path of rods to arcing, that has hurt good men and women, damaged equipment, and killed some people. So we need to be looking at the power lines. We need to look at subsurface. I worked a project in Texas where there was this trench everybody kept coming in and out of. The house was 500 feet off the road, and 811 had came in and done all the locates appropriately, but that wasn't a section that was asked. And so I pulled into my pickup truck and I'm like, what in the world is this trench? And I followed about 150 foot and I found a stake that was backed over that said high pressure gas line. It was far enough away from all the work that was happening that nobody had staked it. But here we were coming in with heavy equipment, trusses, deliveries, cement trucks, driving over this. If this had been a pipeline project, I'd add a mat over top of it, not having that catastrophic situation of damaging that line and somebody getting injured. So I want you to start this week with thinking, what can we encounter before we even start the job? And making a plan for that and being safe. Go out there, let's start turning to the right. But before that, let's do a good site assessment and understand everything that could already be there that's going to impact our profitability and safety for the week. In the news this week, we're going to discuss the bottled water industry in the Great Lakes states, specifically Michigan and Wisconsin. Michigan Public Radio Lester Graham released a story in late March discussing Michigan's water legislature on formerly Nestle but now Blue Triton, who has a permit to pump 400 gallons a minute, 576,000 gallons a day. However, with the increased fluctuation in climate and drought throughout the country, Michigan's legislature is considering widening the rules for impact on natural resources. The Great Lakes Compact protects surface water from being pumped out of the watershed, but does not apply to bottled water. The Great Lakes Charter, established in 1985, outlines a series of principles to collectively manage the use of the Great Lakes Basin water supply. The Great Lakes Charter is what the Great Lakes Compact took its basis off of. And if we look at that, the Great Lakes Compact was put through in 2008, and that is Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, and New York. And what they do is they basically have a consultation process for proposed large water withdrawal out of the Great Lakes Basin. And it's important for us to consider this legislation because as we pull out of the Great Lakes, if it's for irrigation, bottled water, the beverage industry, or major industry, which is all up and down the Great Lakes throughout all the states, we need to know how we're utilizing these resources properly and understanding our withdrawal. Michigan State University has a withdrawal tool for Michigan that shows what we can have for impacts. And it's had good success and it's had some stumblings. The same can be said for Wisconsin and Minnesota and Illinois and Indiana and Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania. So where do we go from there? We have what's called the Public Trust Doctrine. The Public Trust Doctrine protects the public's right to the use of water and resources of the state. This doctrine is what many states throughout the country use: Oregon, Washington, Montana, where there's other large withdrawal discussions happening. Michigan's state constitution includes the Public Trust Doctrine, which states the conservation and development of the natural resources of the state are hereby declared to be of paramount public concern in the interest of the health, safety, and general welfare of the people. The legislature shall provide for the protection of the air, water, and other natural resources of the state from pollution, impairment, and destruction. And that's Article 4, Section 52. Wisconsin has similar doctrine in place, and right now we can see that they're in the spotlight for water withdrawal of Lake Superior in Bayfield County, where they would like to bottle water out of an artesian well. You know, the Great Lakes Compact was put into place when Waukesha, Wisconsin had major issues with their water supply and wanted to start pulling out of the Great Lakes. Bottled water, industry water, irrigation, again, this all comes back to us understanding who's advocating for responsible stewardship of our groundwater. And with these new legislations in place, we need to know how this is going to impact us as an industry, locally and nationally. You know, the Great Lakes Charter with Quebec and Ontario, along with the Great Lakes states, is in place to protect, like I said, 20% of the fresh water, surface water in the world. And we have to use these things smart, understand how we can minimize our withdrawal, go to zero use technologies, and again, know that we have several more lifetimes that need to be able to enjoy these resources from a leisure standpoint and from an industrial or use standpoint.
Hello, welcome to our featured driller section of the Driller Newscast. And I'm very excited because this week we have an international driller north of the 48, a personal friend of mine, Mike Steffens from Ontario, Canada. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Mike.
Hi, Mike Steffen from Teeswater, Ontario, owner of Steffen Well Drilling. Yeah, most just probably already know me.
Mike, how did drilling get into your blood?
I can tell you a real complicated answer to that, but the real answer is I was unemployed and needed a job, and the local drilling company was hiring, and they told me they needed somebody with a strong back and a weak mind. So they hired me.
And if I remember right, you've drilled all over Canada, right?
Yeah, drilled all over Ontario, northern Quebec, Labrador, and northern Alberta.
Wow, is all of that drilling pretty different?
Yeah, it changes greatly. Everything from sand wells to drilling the Canadian Shield, tar sand coring, dewatering projects in northern Quebec and Labrador.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So with all of that, what is your go-to drilling method that you prefer most?
Uh, First drill rig I was on was a table drive mud rotary. I like them. They're simple. They work. And when they break, you can see the problem. After that, I got introduced to dual rotary on a foremost. They had a DR12 and a 24. For a lot of work, I really like them. Mud, every drill style has its place. When I went on my own, I bought a old Bucyrus rotary, mud drilled and then air drilled once we were in the rock. And then about a year and a half ago, I bought my first Derex dual rotary. Was pretty fortunate, was able to sell it in December and purchase a brand new the PTO model with air, the first one they built. And for doing 6-inch work is 99.9% of our business. It's been fantastic.
You worked for several companies. How did you decide to choose Teeswater, Ontario, and start your own business? Is that where you're from?
Born and raised in the Wingham Teeswater area. I moved out west for a very short time. And besides traveling with work, yeah, this is kind of my home stomping ground. The company I worked for the majority of my drilling career before going on my own, they went out of business. And there was definitely a need for another well drilling company around.
And so you decided to open your own business.
Yeah. Mortgage the house to the max and jump in with both feet.
So you, when I first met you, you were running mud rotary, and now you're running dual rotary in these same areas. What is the biggest lesson you've learned between running the two different methods?
Well, the biggest thing I miss about running my mud rotary rig is I could listen to the radio that we had mounted on the back of the rig while I was drilling. And now I've got to use those fancy earphones with radio in them if I want to listen to it. There's definitely spots where I still prefer mud. If you're getting into flowing conditions and you're looking to cement in casing, which it can all be done with a dual rotary as well. We don't get into a lot of flowing conditions here. I think last year I maybe had 8 or 10 flowing wells, and proper grouting, put in a bit of a surface casing if needed, but otherwise for the work I do, I can drill a lot more wells of equal or better quality and put a lot less man hours in running my Derex over my mud rotary rig.
Are these open rock holes or are these screened wells?
15 to 20%, maybe a little better, would be screened and unscreened gravel or sand wells, and the rest would be cased to limestone, granite in the north, and then open hole till you find water.
Well, thanks, Mike. If you would like to be a featured driller or featured industry professional on the Driller Newscast, email me at questions at askbrock.com, and we'll set up a time and we'll chat just like Mike and I did. Thanks again, Mike.
Have a good day, Brock. See you later.
Thanks.
For our main story this week, I want to talk about mental health in the construction industry. We're a rough and tough industry where often the solution to many problems is a bigger hammer. But I've often talked about how we need to become a warmer, fuzzier industry. We can see this in the issues we have with recruitment and retaining, to how we work amongst one another. And let's face it, the last 28 months have not been the most pleasurable. We are essential workers and we've been on the road, and many things that were a release or a way for us to get out of our heads for the night were closed. And so we were spending more time alone in hotel rooms and FaceTiming and those things. But let's face it, as the industry grows and we become more big company, we're less family run, and it's no longer father and son and grandfather and aunt and mother and cousins. And so when people start acting differently, exhausted or short or just not in a good place, we need to be talking to them. We need to find out what's going on. If it's something to do with at home finances, or a bigger picture of this crazy virus and all the people that have been lost to this thing. And then we had the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and that was just a complete horrible fumble. And now we have a war in Ukraine and increased gas prices, which is impacting everybody's pocketbooks. So there's a lot going on, and we have many ways of communicating with one another, from texts to phone calls to, hey, let's just sit on the back of the tailgate right here in the hotel parking lot and let's have a talk. But we need to be checking in with one another. And mental illness in our industry is actually the biggest cause of death for construction, for oil and gas, mining. And we can see that with the statistics. You know, according to the CDC, suicide is the highest cause of death in our industry. Men are 95% of our industry, and men are 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide. In the mining, quarry, oil and gas extraction, men, 54.2 men per 100,000 workers commit suicide a year. Number two in that is construction, and that's construction men, 45.3 per 100,000 workers commit suicide each year. So we need to start having one another's back better. And I think about this because 8 months ago, my father passed away due to COVID, and I spent the entire month of August with him in the hospital and then with him in the ICU, laughing, crying, helping him breathe. There were ups and downs. He was an individual that fought like hell on everything, and we believed he'd beat this as well. And then he didn't. And I spent a lot of time at home for that month, and we're an industry that travels. We're all over the place. And so immediately I went back to work, and I shoved everything that I had just experienced down, and I buried myself in my work and in writing and creating things. And I didn't ask for help. I didn't talk to people. And I was sad. I was depressed. And I kept thinking to myself, stop being a sissy. This isn't you. You're not weak, but it can affect us all, you know, and it takes finding somebody to talk to. And that sometimes that person may not be your partner or your best friend or your boss. Today we have online forums and video chat and text messaging and hotlines. There's plenty of places to have a discussion and get help. And when we see that colleague or individual that is doing a destructive behavior, if it's video games or adult beverages or spending excessive amounts of money or whatever the situation may be that just doesn't seem right, we got to talk to them and we got to see if we can get them help. Because we can be the industry that, though we like a bigger hammer, we can also be the one to help push that immovable rock in the right direction so that they can be better too. And it's one way that our industry is going to grow is by understanding that we have to connect. And I know we're not all going to get along, but this is very important for us to connect and have each other's back and know that sometimes somebody is physically on site and mentally not there, and they can get hurt there, or they can be hurting themselves in another way in a hotel room. And I know good men in this industry who have succumbed to the depression and committed suicide, and it's not what should have happened. And so I'm saying, go out there, be the voice for that individual, ask the questions, or if it's you, make the phone call. My phone number is at the end of every one of my articles, and it is my email is there too. You can text me and I'll help you. There's plenty of people out there. And I think about this right now with it being a week later after Taylor Hawkins with Foo Fighters passing away. And we don't know what was going on with that man, but he was in a rock band, one of the greatest rock bands ever. And he's gone. And it was a destructive behavior. And it's, you can be driven and accomplishing every goals and as competent at your job and family as possible. And it's okay to be sad, but get the right help. So that's what I'm saying, industry. We need to say, hey, I love you, man or gal, and be smart and look at these statistics, because there's not a JSA in the world that we've written that talks about how we could do better for mental health and just health in general. So go out there. I'm doing great right now, but it's okay to struggle with these things. It's just about finding that right individual and being able to have the conversation that'll put you right mind-wise and health-wise. Thank you for joining us on the Driller Newscast episode 5. If you have a great success story or failure, or would like to be featured as a industry professional, would like to share some knowledge, please reach out to me on my email, questions@askbrock.com. Check out the Driller's social media, LinkedIn and Facebook, and thedriller.com, where there's great stories from our editor, Jeremy, Dave Bowers on safety, Jake Fletcher on leadership. John is always talking about cable tool. Jessica's talking HR. There's so much going on. David's talking about supply chain. Come share knowledge with us and continue to progress our industry. Thank you, BMP Media, for believing in this idea of delivering relevant news weekly and sharing knowledge and inspiring the industry. Go out, be safe, hug your colleagues if you're allowed to do that appropriately, but we definitely need to be thinking about where our people are, not just because they're running our equipment, because they're important to us. Cheers, everybody.